All right, everyone, welcome. So today we're kicking off our journey into phenomenology, and we're starting right at the source with its founder, Edmund Husserl, and we're going to be looking at what is, without a doubt, one of the most ambitious projects in all of 20th century philosophy. His attempt to basically tear philosophy down to the studs and rebuild it as a truly rigorous science.
And this is the question that really gets the whole thing started. You have to understand, back in the late 19th century, this wasn't just some abstract academic question. For philosophers, this was an existential crisis. The entire discipline was trying to figure out what it was for. And this question, can we be a science, was hanging over absolutely everything. So to really get why Husserl felt his project was so incredibly urgent, we have to kind of step back and look at the intellectual world he was walking into. And for philosophy, let me tell you, it was a mess. I mean, think about it. The 19th century was this intellectual battlefield, just littered with the ruins of these grand philosophical systems. You had Hegel, you had Kant, all these giants, all claiming to have the final answer, and well, all flatly contradicting each other. And at the exact same time, you have these new sciences splitting off from philosophy, claiming their own turf. Psychology is the big one. It used to be just a branch of philosophy, and now it's setting up shop as its own empirical science. So philosophy is on its back foot, right? People are seriously starting to ask, what are you even for anymore? What can you tell us that science can't? And right in the middle of all this chaos, this new idea pops up, and it's really seductive. It sounds so scientific, so modern. But as Husserl would come to realize, it was a trap. It was an idea that could have just erased philosophy completely.
This big threat was called psychologism. And the core idea is actually pretty straightforward. It says that the things we think of as objective, timeless truths, the laws of logic or mathematical facts like 2 + 2 = 4, they aren't really true out there in the world. Nope. According to psychologism, they're just descriptions of how our human brains happen to be wired. They're basically just interesting psychological facts about our species.
And this is where you can really see the problem crystal clear. Psychologism is confusing two totally different kinds of statements. On one hand, you have an objective truth, like the law of non-contradiction. Something can't be both A and not A at the same time. That's a law about reality itself. On the other hand, you have a psychological fact. We humans find it really, really hard to think about a contradiction. See the difference? One is about how the world is, the other is about how our minds work. Psychologism just smashes them together and says they're the same thing. So what's the big deal? Well, think about where this leads. It has this absolutely disastrous consequence. If the laws of logic are just based on the way humans happen to think, then there's no objective standard for truth. We can't tell someone their reasoning is illogical or just plain wrong. All we can say is, your brain seems to work a little differently than mine. The entire concept of objective truth just completely collapses into radical relativism.
And here's the kicker. This whole way of thinking basically eats its own tail. As Husserl so brilliantly pointed out, this kind of radical relativism is self-refuting. The moment you stand up and claim all truth is subjective, you are making what you believe to be an objective claim about the nature of truth itself. You've contradicted yourself right out of the gate. It's a classic philosophical faceplant.
And this is where our guy Edmund Husserl enters the scene. What makes his story so amazing is that he wasn't just some outsider pointing fingers. No, he was in it. He actually flirted with psychologism himself, and he had to fight his way out of it from the inside, which is exactly what made him its most powerful critic.
I mean, if you look at his own intellectual journey, his early work from 1891, The Philosophy of Arithmetic, you can see him leaning right into psychologism. He's trying to ground our concept of number in our own mental acts. But then, just a decade later, boom, he publishes his masterpiece, The Logical Investigations, and it's a complete 180-degree turn. It is one of the most systematic, powerful takedowns of psychologism ever written.
So what was the big insight? What was his breakthrough? It all comes down to this absolutely crucial distinction. Husserl said we have to draw a sharp line between the psychical act of thinking, that is, the actual event happening in your brain in real time, and the objective meaning or content of that thought. For example, my act of thinking 2 + 2 = 4 and your act of thinking 2 + 2 = 4 are two totally different events in the universe. But the meaning itself, the truth that 2 + 2 = 4, is one and the same for both of us. It's ideal, it's timeless. And that, Husserl argued, is what logic is about. Not the messy, fleeting events in our heads, but the stable, objective realm of meaning.
But Husserl wasn't just interested in tearing things down. For him, defeating psychologism was just step one. That was just clearing the construction site. His real, ultimate goal was to build something brand new on that cleared ground, a totally unshakable foundation for philosophy itself.
He even had a name for this lifelong ambition: Philosophie als strenge Wissenschaft, philosophy as a rigorous or strict science. Think about how bold that is. Like Descartes before him, he wanted to find a starting point for all of philosophy that was so certain, so absolutely grounded in undeniable insight that it could serve as the foundation for everything else we claim to know. So how on earth do you even begin to do that? Well, Husserl proposed this really radical method, a series of mental steps. First, he says we have to suspend all our judgments, all our biases and presuppositions about the world. Just set them aside. Second, and this is the most famous part, we have to bracket what he calls the natural attitude. This is just our default everyday belief that there's a physical world out there that exists independently of us. You don't deny it, you just put that belief on hold. And finally, once all that is cleared away, you ground all knowledge in the only thing that's left, the things given to you with absolute indubitable certainty in your own direct experience. Now, this is super important because it's where a lot of people get tripped up. When Husserl says we need to bracket the world, he is not saying the world doesn't exist. He's not a skeptic. This is a methodological move. He's basically saying, let's put aside the belief in the external world for a moment so we can find something even more fundamental, something we can't doubt. And for him, that unshakable starting point is consciousness itself.
And so that leads us to the big, mind-bending question that will launch us into our next discussion. If we actually follow Husserl, if we perform this radical bracketing and set aside every single assumption we have about reality, about science, about the world, what, if anything, is left? That question is the gateway into the world of phenomenology, and it's exactly where we're going to pick things up next time.